Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Episode of MSP 1337. I know we've talked about AI in the past. Maybe we've overly talked about AI, but AI is here to stay. It's not going to leave us. And so today I'm privileged to have Dr. Adeel Sheikh Mohammed on the show with Adeel Solutions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
So let's just give a little bit of clarity to, you're kind of an important guest today. I mean, you've got you function and serve in the world of being a CISO. You've done a lot and have won multiple awards in cybersecurity as an AI researcher and also an author. And today, I think it's a great opportunity to talk about governance, maybe AI ethics. I know we've touched on some of these things before, but you brought up a really good point, and we were talking earlier before we started to record. What does it look like when we talk about technology or tools, and then we associate the same idea with AI? So I mentioned, when we say things like, I need to look at purchasing QuickBooks or Xero or another accounting package, you and I both come to the same conclusion about how that technology is going to be used. It's pretty obvious, it's in the name. But as soon as we shift to something like Copilot, yeah, we can agree on who it's the creator, and we can agree on kind of the concept of how you would go about maybe using it, but neither one of us are going to go into it with the same desired outcomes. And I think that's where really our conversation needs to start, is like when someone says, I'm going to implement XYZ product, tool, service that is largely built around some sort of AI model, what is the desired outcome? And maybe you can just give some clarity of like, we know we're in an AI-driven world, and that's not even necessarily a fair statement, because we're barely scratching the surface of what AI can do today, or maybe not necessarily what it can do today, but how we're currently using it today. So let's just start there and give some context to what you envision and maybe how we should shape the rest of this conversation.
Exactly. Thank you, Chris. So, Chris, your question has a little bit of answer also. You are amazing, mashallah. So, the thing is that AI is being used for so many different things, as you said, that we are barely scratching the surface. So, in every department, we are using AI. So, that's why we don't know the outcomes, we don't know the use cases, and we are rushing up towards this race of AI. Like, at least the departments should sit before procuring AI, that what each department wants, and like how they can improve the productivity, how they can reduce the cost as per the business outcomes. So
Okay.
those are not clear usually, and like they just need that tag that we are AI powered, we are AI driven, we are already using in our products and solutions AI. So that's sort of a rush, hype in that form. But you are right. If you would talk about QuickBook, Tally, Odoo, SAP, Oracle, any of these products, we know the outcomes, what we want to achieve. But here it's like sort of a mess, because the use cases are not defined. Like nobody's sitting and defining those use cases, because this is the first step. If you don't have the use cases, how you will make policies in future, how you will govern this part, how you will make the guardrails around it, right?
Sure. Well, and you're a security expert. You've been blessed with being put in the role of CISO, the four-letter word that we all cringe at saying, because if it's your title, then you're like, oh, what comes next might be how I exit this opportunity, right? I'm the fall guy, right? But what was interesting, with that, I think about no one's really going, I question the use of AI in some sort of technology like to better tune a firewall or to help summarize information. We all have seen how valuable and how quick AI tools are at giving us some of those outcomes. But then you start thinking about things like, yesterday I couldn't write code. I couldn't have built the app that was in my head. Today I have, Vibe or some other lovable type model where I can go in and articulate in plain English my goal. And in theory, I get close to, or maybe in some cases, in many cases actually, I get a full blown application that's been built to do exactly what I want. And that therein lies an extremely large problem. And that problem is, okay, is it secure? What does it have access to? What can it have access to? How can it be manipulated? What are the things that I'm not thinking about, nor will I ever think about? Because yesterday, or as the joke we say here in the States is, well, last night I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express, so therefore I'm also a doctor, right? Like, I mean, is this kind of the challenge that you're seeing that we're facing, is that we're so quick to go say I can solve for X because of this newfound technology, that I'm not even remotely considering the consequences of going down that path.
Chris, I was there in yesterday. There was a small conference on open claw, that's taken over the internet in last few weeks, moldbot, or whatever you call it. So that was the point which came up, that earlier when Microsoft tried this Copilot, and they say that the Copilot will be seeing whatever you will be doing, and it will be guiding you, helping you. The whole market backlash. This is like around 1.5 to 2 years back, and now this is a norm. Like when Moldbook came and Moldbot came or OpenClaw came, everybody accepted it. Like
Yeah.
nobody is talking about that risk. Nobody is, like people are talking. People like us, cybersecurity professionals, are raising that concern that where's your security? How you are giving the whole access to your computer? And this is not only OpenClaw itself. You see that all those LLMs also have the access. All those integrations. You have Telegram. You have other applications. So those have the accesses. But I think we are we just passed that barrier, and we are ahead now. Like people say that, oh wow, it can do this stuff, it can write me this, it can automate the stuff which I'm asking you, the one step which is having 3 4 steps in between, and it's doing all that stuff. So it's awesome, and I'm not worried about cybersecurity. So that's the
Sure.
dilemma now.
So, we talked about a little bit where this is going, or what we're seeing happening, without really having clear understanding of, say, the desired outcomes, in advance. We're not picking tools based on outcomes. We're using tools and getting outcomes. We're like, oh, look what I just did. And yeah, and in a lot of cases, sometimes we're finding or discovering really valuable things. I think the whole premise behind being a scientist is to go and discover, figure out how something might work in a different way that maybe reduces, the use of energy, or does things more efficiently. Those are all, drugs that cure things. Those are all why scientists have gotten into doing what they do, the research, et cetera. But in the AI space, we're more of just trying to say, I want to solve a problem. I tell it the problem I want to solve. And sometimes it gets it right out of the gate. Sometimes it doesn't come close at all. And in other times, we spend, hours manipulating at a prompt, or some other way of approaching the AI to get a desired outcome. And in many cases, those desired outcomes are not tied to how I started. They're tied to
Right.
that progression of continuing to write prompts and going back and forth. And in some respects, one could say, my idea has changed because of the interaction with the tool. For good or bad, today, the outcome may not be good for humanity, or for myself, or for anybody else, but because I allowed this to be done in this way. So that was one of the things that, and I was just curious, kind of went down a rabbit hole there. But when I think about scientists and doing research, they start things off with a hypothesis, they build a theory, right? And they go through the process of proving that to get to a desired outcome based on that. No one else is influencing that from the outside as a mirror of reflection with all of the information at its fingertips. When we do this with a prompt, with a notebook LM, or fill in the blank, we're allowing all of the good and also all of the bad and all of the neutral to influence what I do next. Do you see that being problematic, if not now, in the future?
Exactly, this is the problem now also. These systems will have open ground to go right, left, or center. So this is a big problem, I must say, and especially from the cybersecurity point of view. I'm sure you know there are some models which were came just for the cybersecurity, just to tackle that problem. So
Sure.
again, they try to make it in an ethical way, but the unethical guys can also use them because they are open, and the guardrails are like not that strong, using different LLM models. So that's the thing that it's very difficult to put those guardrails, and then there need to be a balance, I must say. Lastly, Elon Musk also said on this point that if there are more referees in the playing field, how you will play, right?
Yeah.
So
If you know you're being watched, how differently you might perform.
exactly. That's also a thing. So, like at least we should have a balance, like not too
Yeah.
much guardians and not too much, uh,
It,
independence.
yeah, not to go too far off topic here, but I think about like when you build roads, particularly when you build roads in mountainous terrain or hilly terrain or any place that there's going to be lots of winding in those roads. They don't generally lead with let's build the road and or sorry, let's build guardrails and then build the road. They build a road and then based on how people drive on it, they figure out where the guardrails need to go. And I think that is acceptable, I think, today when we're building roads. But when we're doing this with AI, oftentimes adding a guardrail after the fact means that it's too late. The guardrail is no longer a seen as a going to actually keep things from happening, but now is identifying clearly a target of how one can go about manipulating. Because once the guardrail's been put in, you know that you can talk to that tool or that LLM and say, "Hey, I see a guardrail here. And let's figure out how to get around this guardrail."
There was a very amazing experiment where they put a kiosk, and that vending machine was based out of AI. I'm sure you have seen that.
Yeah,
It's so very popular. So the team, the journalists were trying to break it. So as you mentioned, that the guardrails were already there, and then they tried to build it, and I think there were like three phases, and all three phases humans break it. Like
sure.
sometimes they were coming up with a document and showcasing that, see, I have the approval that please give me the product for free. And the
Right.
LLM, that machine was saying, okay, that's fine. And even they tried to put an CEO above it, like multiple labels of AIs, but still, they all say that, okay, take the product for free.
We've seen that also happen with car dealerships and convincing the dealership to sell me a car for $1, right? Like this just continues on and on and on. And I think well, I think things are getting better. I don't know that they'll get better fast enough for us to all feel comfortable suddenly with how we might use AI in those similar instances. Let's shift gears for a minute. In your role and participating as a CISO, I'm just curious, wearing that hat, what it's like to navigate requests around implementing tools defined by the AI capabilities versus what they would have been before, where we didn't broadcast to the world, even if it did have AI functionality, how that is impacting you as a CISO.
It's tough, because I will go
That's the
back to
answer. There you have it.
exactly. I will go back to that first specification which I mentioned, use cases. So the use cases are not defined, and board is saying that who is the right person for governing AI or for ethical AI, and they are putting the legal team head of CA, like a CAIO,
Yeah.
chief AI officer. So without even considering that he knows AI or not. So I will not say that, cybersecurity is the right person, but it's like a mutual responsibility. There is CTO who are like, the designers, the deployers, the cybersecurity team, the legal team, and also the board, the leadership team.
Sure.
So it's like some mutual responsibility, not one guy's.
Yeah, so that comes back to something that we say a lot at GTIA in our cybersecurity programs, and that is that we have a formula: leadership plus strategy plus culture over governance is equal to cybersecurity maturity enablement. And
Love
while
that.
that you can adjust the formula as you see fit to what you just said, I think you highlighted how all of the pieces have to come together with an agreement and an understanding. And I think the understanding part is probably the most critical in order for the rowing of that boat to all be rowing in the right direction and putting the oar in the water at the right time so that the boat doesn't go in circles. I joke, anybody that's seen a rom-com or some sort of romantic type movie where there's the trying to build out and they go out on a rowboat on a pond or a lake. I always laugh at that because if anybody has ever actually tried to row a real rowboat, it is not easy to do. And I always laugh because when you see these rom-coms, it's like they make it look so effortless to get out into the water and then do all of the romantic things. And it's like, no, by the time they get to the middle of the pond, they're exhausted. And those oars are huge. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what we're challenged with here, right? Like until someone sits down and has been given the oars placed in their hands and say, okay, I want you to go in a straight line across this body of water. They're like, wait, what? And they start rowing and they think, okay, this is actually not that hard, only to find out that obviously one arm is more dominant than the other. And so every time they pull, they're going further and
Right,
further
right.
out of alignment. How do you really get that conversation to happen where you don't end up in the shadow IT or the behind closed doors? The board has agreed we're doing this anyways, and HR doesn't know anything about it, and employees are taking advantage of what's being handed down as like, you got the green light, go have fun, build out, and make us a lot of money. How do you navigate that? Because I think that's what we're sitting on right now. Governance is not fun. Risk is not fun. No one wants to talk about either of those two things. But every time I turn around and I look at something related to a cybersecurity label or a cybersecurity, line card, or how technology and tools are going to protect us from these bad things, governance rears its head and says, "Oh, by the way, you forgot about me." And so all the things that you've done, well, they're really not going to work.
Exactly, because these are some elements of the same puzzle. So if they are not put together in proper way, you will not get the output what you are looking for. Moreover, I need to touch here some of the governance also, which are like as of now we are not fully there, but they are a good starting point. Just like we have NIST AIRMF, we have in EU this AI Act, the EU AI Act. Then you have the ISO 42001. So these are some of the ones which as just the starting point. But the problem in the market is that people think that these are enough, right? Like
Sure.
the audit is not equal to assurance, right? So we need to be like build those resilience point around it, because risk cannot be zero at any time.
So do you think there's also an element then when you go down that path? I think you brought up some really good references, and NIST has actually had for a while now their entire AI guide, which is largely around, if you're building tools or products that are built on AI, what's the model to do that? I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like we went to the races with this idea to go and solve for something that we already had the answers for. And so now we've created a whole slew of other challenges because we didn't actually set out to enforce things like DLP and data privacy laws with the tools we already have. So now you introduce something like access to the copilot or fill in the blank, and the user, because they weren't educated on what is appropriate versus inappropriate usage of the tool, is violating all kinds of potential privacy laws or security resources that were put in place because they're using something that is, quite honestly, even though we can't say that it has its own intelligence or its consciousness, it has access to all of the information at once. So, good, bad, or otherwise, everything that you have fed it, whether you fed it yourself or not, it is going to use that to get you what you want. Now, we can argue that it is or isn't trying to make you happy with the answers that it gives you. The reality is it's trying to ensure that it gives you everything that it thinks is relevant to what you did ask.
True, true. You are right. You are right. But the problem is that even if there is always this myth that you say that these AI models, like these governance models, for example, are enough, right? Like they are providing you what need to be provided, or I'm sure you have heard it that cyber is the CIO problem, right? Or cyber is
Yeah.
the CISO problem, right? So the AI adoption basically automatically means that innovation. But you are right. Sometimes there is only fine tuning is required, right? It's not about buying new solutions out of okay, now we have to manage ISO 42001, so let's go and buy 50 different solutions which are like complying to that stuff. It's not always that. And just fine
But you're
tuning of
just,
the same solutions which you have, just like you mentioned DLP,
yeah. What
DLP, DC, and it's already there.
Yeah, but I think that you just brought up something that's really interesting. I think in the world of ITSPs, MSSPs, those kind of roles, you're getting into the perfection world, right? Like, I don't want to finish solving for my asset inventory until it's perfect and moving on to the next one because, well, my asset inventory is not perfect. Or we're doing secure baseline configurations and I'm just not really happy. I got to keep tweaking it. And so you never get out of that mode of trying to make it perfect. I think that's largely, if you're in the IT space, I think the engineering brain is wired to say, I want to make sure it's well done, not okay is actually impressive when you think about what okay means. Okay means that the probability of this happening has been lowered drastically from I have done nothing. And I think that gets missed. So every time I look at a tool to solve for that problem, I'm not taking the time, which kind of goes back to the beginning of this conversation. I'm not taking the time to look at what do I already have that might be addressing this at some level versus trying to get something in that addresses it at a more complete or a more robust way.
That's why we have the concept of this continuous authentication, continuous monitoring, continuous. Why continuous? And NIST is paying a lot of attention towards this continuous thing. The reason is
Yeah.
that because so that's what's happening. Tomorrow is the audit. I'm sure you have seen those memes also where there is no road, right and left and center. There is a road because of that audit days, right?
Yeah.
So it should need to be continuous. And like those efforts. That's why there are some frameworks which has those maturity levels: maturity 3,
Yeah.
maturity 4, maturity 5. Because again, it's a continuous process. You cannot stop.
Well, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, as we still have a few minutes left, but I think the term auditing my environment as a pass fail model is destroying our ability to have continuous improvement. Because when you tell me that I pass, in essence, I am getting that warm, fuzzy feeling of like the likes on Facebook that says, I did it and now I'm done. As opposed to saying, hey, we found that your environment, based on the set of standards we were assessing you against, here are the areas for improvement. I expect to see these improved upon when I see you again, whatever that future date might be. And I think annually, unfortunately, annually is what it is, but it's not what it actually implies. Annually means that when the auditor sees it, not the same as what you are doing, what that leads up to seeing the auditor again. So auditor doesn't have to do any moving, right? The auditor just has to walk around the pond to the other side and watch you struggle to get across in your rowboat. By the time
True.
you've done this 2 or 3 times, your rowboat should row in a pretty straight line to wherever that auditor is. And if the auditor moves, you should have no problem navigating to your new destination.
That's what always happen. The new version comes from for the ISO for Nest, and like people are like, oh, I need to find new consultant.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
And we talk about
uh,
that too, right? Like, so when you go through an audit and you have, fill in the blank, whoever your auditor is, I think it's really important when you do this in the following year to have a different auditor. I would guarantee you, I shouldn't guarantee, that's dangerous, but there's a very good chance that they will find something that's uniquely different than what that other auditor did.
we
And I
always
think
say
it's
in
important.
cybersecurity, too. We always say in cybersecurity, have a second opinion. So, I'm doing pen testing from the same vendor for last 5 years. Man, this is not a good practice. Change the
Right.
vendor.
Yeah, that's kind of like you ever I mean, taking medication, they say, you take too many antibiotics, eventually the antibiotic stops working, right? And now you're
Exactly.
sick and there's nothing you can do about it. I think that's kind of
True.
like pen testing, right? If I continue to have the same pen test over and over and over again, eventually a bad thing is going to happen that's going to use a different tactic than what the pen tester was testing for.
True, true. And that's what's happening. I have the examples where the audit just passed last week and they got breached. Oh, I'm sure you also heard about these stories because again, audit is not equal to assurance.
No, and compliance does not equal security. I think security doesn't always equal compliance. There's so many, areas that we could navigate and rabbit holes we could go down. We've got a couple minutes left. I like to ask this question. It tends to take a minute or two. In the last year, or maybe even just recently, or maybe still not quite done, is there a book that you are reading or have read in the last year that you think the audience would gravitate towards as something that they should also be reading?
I must say, please read my book.
Perfect. And please tell the audience what your book is.
Exactly. So my first book is on AI transformation of SOC and SecOps. So the first edition was just theoretical, and the second edition is with the use cases, with the product descriptions. And the other book is on AI and us, the ethical choices, the responsible AI, and all those guardrails which we were discussing here now. So that is the second book, and that will open many areas, many rabbit holes as we were discussing about this thing. The business things, the accountability, the transparency, and all that topics.
So, and where can they get copies of your book?
Thank you, Chris. It's on Amazon. I will share the links with you.
Yes, please do. And I'll make sure to share the link in the description of the episode. That is great insights. I currently am still reading the same book that I was reading almost a month ago. So I won't share that one again because, well, the audience has already heard it at least a couple times. Solid Ground. I was just kidding. I'd still tell it. I'm reading the book Solid Ground. I'll just reference a key piece in it that I think is kind of cool since we just had the Super Bowl. It talks about how when you do something, how it's impacted by your feet being solidly planted on the ground. And it talks about things like pickleball, and then it goes into football. And it was pointing out, and this is something I think is really interesting as it uses it a lot throughout the book, is that when you go to tackle somebody, you'll notice that the person who is running with the ball that they're trying to tackle, if the person that goes to tackle them is airborne, they often fail at bringing that runner down. But the person that has their feet solidly anchored on the ground, when they go to wrap their arms around that runner, they have a tendency to pulling that individual to the ground because they have the ability to push off and leverage all of that force. Once you're airborne, you no longer have any additional force working in your favor. And so I just thought that was really interesting to look at all the things that we're doing to know that, hey, if your feet are firmly planted on the ground, you're going to be likely to be more successful.
Cool, cool.
All right.
Amazing strategy.
Well, for those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.
Thank you.